Welcome to The Difference Engine, the show for tech founders, investors, and innovators. Our guest today on The Difference Engine, in association with Boardwave, is Boardwave member Sean Williams.
Sean is the founder and CEO of AutogenAI, a UK-based scaleup that helps organizations bid for public sector and corporate contracts by using AI natural language processing to write compelling proposals, ultimately saving time, reducing costs, and boosting success rates.
Clearly, Sean isn't alone in thinking this is a good idea. We assume anyone who has to write any sort of proposal would like some help, to the extent that AutogenAI has secured over $60 million in funding with top-tier investors such as Blossom Capital, Spark Capital, and Salesforce Ventures.
AutogenAI isn't Sean's first entrepreneurial rodeo. He previously founded and served as CEO of Corndel Ltd, which helps HR, learning and development teams across many industries to find ways to invest their apprenticeship levy to add real, lasting value to their organizations.
He scaled the business from the ground up to a team of 350. In November 2020, he successfully sold Corndel to THI Holdings for $60 million.
A philosophy graduate from Cambridge University and, as you're about to find out, a bit of a Renaissance man, he still finds time to be a board member of the Sussex Community Development Association.
Sean Williams, welcome to The Difference Engine. So your current day job is being founder and CEO of AutogenAI. Can you tell us, why you're doing it and how did you get there?
Yeah, so great to be here. I sold my previous business in September 2020, and then I left that business in September 2021 and actually retired. I retired for 3 weeks. It's the most boring 3 weeks of my life. But I did have an opportunity to sort of explore some technologies while I was retired. So I looked a bit into blockchain, and so I thought I'd find out what all the hype was about. And so learnt about hash functions and cryptography. And I thought this was intellectually fascinating, but I couldn't really see any real world applications that I believed in. I didn't think there were any real problems that were being solved by this technology. Very interesting though it was. And then I started looking at Internet of Things, and I bought myself a little Arduino kit and started turning LED lights on and off from the internet. I thought I was sort of pretty hot at this electronic engineering.
You were clearly very, very bored, Sean.
I was very, very bored, but I was having great fun. And I could see tons of applications for Internet of Things type technologies, but mainly in sort of agriculture and manufacturing. And I don't know anything about agriculture and manufacturing. And who am I kidding? I also probably wasn't the best engineer in 3 weeks of having sort of self-taught myself. And then I was just really fortunate. One of my best friends, Andrew Cowie, who works for Google's DeepMind on the protein folding team, phoned me up and said, "Hey, Sean, I know you're bored and you're sat around. Why don't you look at these things called large language models? Like they're really interesting. Like we've built one, and this company no one's ever heard of called OpenAI have built one, and they're doing interesting stuff with language. They can sort of read and write." And I said, "Don't be silly, Andy. Computers can't read and write." I sort of argued for 20 years that computers would never be able to do language. And Andy's a mathematician. He doesn't understand language, right? So, don't be silly. I'm a philosopher. Let me tell you about language. It's very hard, far too hard for computers. But I was bored, and so I thought I'd take a look, and I was utterly blown away. So, I never thought I'd see in my lifetime computers able to read and write, and suddenly had this machine that could. So I started playing with it. You hear a lot of people who work with large language models use that metaphor, play. Like, it really still does feel like playing to me with the technology. So you talk to the large language model. And one of the first things I did was use multi-shot prompting, which was kind of like a new technique at the time. Obviously, it's completely passé now, but there were so few people doing this. It was all frontier, and I got it to write new P.G. Wodehouse one-liners. And so again, I discovered very early on, you can get the AI to write P.G. Wodehouse one-liners, get them to write 10. 9 of them will be rubbish, but 1 of them will be really good. So you need the human to pick the one which will be really good.
There is a little bit of humour in there. I don't know where it's come from, but you could probably tell us. But yeah, you can make it do jokes.
You often, I think it's accidental. That's really what I think. I think it's accidental. So it will come up with 10 lines it thinks PG Wodehouse would come up with, and 9 of them PG Wodehouse definitely wouldn't have come up with. But one of them it accidentally gets right. And so again, start to notice things like human in the loop and things which would become kind of like commonplace, but we were discovering for the first time. And then I got it to do things like translate Paradise Lost into modern English and kind of say all of these things which were kind of quite interesting in playing with the machine.
What was it that made you start to turn your attention to something a little bit more serious and may we say a little bit dull?
Yes. So my very, very first career was actually as a proposal writer. So I was writing bids at my first job to the Department for Work and Pensions in the UK to run unemployment services, and then sort of wider kind of social programs, and then other kind of wider government services. So I knew both how much money and how much time was spent putting together these bids, tenders and proposals for government contracts, but also business-to-business contracts. And so I knew the problem case, and I saw this new technology, and I kept thinking to myself, for all of the strengths and limitations actually of this technology, like proposals is such an obvious and good use case for this new tech, and nobody really understood proposals as well as I did. Like, lots of people who understood it as well as I did, but no one really understood it better because I'd come from that world right in my very first career. So I understood the problem case backwards, and kind of no one else was really doing this with large language models. So it seemed like an obvious intersection of ideas with a very clear commercial application. And I thought it would be too boring for people like Google or OpenAI. OpenAI were talking about AGI at the time. Google, when Andy showed me the technology, he said, yeah, we're not really doing anything with it. Like building stuff with it is a bit downstream for us. It's not going to win them the Nobel Prize, not that interested in it. So really, I could see an opportunity to be downstream, to do the commercial, boring stuff, but to create a brilliant product that would actually solve a very real problem for real businesses and real people.
Right. So there wasn't any particular light bulb moment. It was just simply your experience of being involved in the relentless, soul-destroying task of turning out huge, complex proposals. There has to be a better way of doing it.
Absolutely, and loads of people had tried to sell me software when I was working in that space, and I said, well, there's like bid management software and there's tender finding software, but the real interesting thing is the writing. And prior to large language models, computers were absolutely no good at that. They added no value to the writing process. Whereas post large language models, computers could add an enormous amount of value to that writing process when driven by a human.
What is it you've had to do to go from large language model to a full commercial product that actually solves that problem that you've had to live through to identify?
I think you start from what actually is it proposal writers are doing. So I've actually still got like the first picture I drew, and I said, well, what are the tasks that proposal writers find, irritating or kind of like, well, ideation, how do you actually start to come up from, how do you go from a blank page to ideas to a structure? And so, the very first version of the tool we bought, it was literally just trying to help people get ideas, which they could then use a nice user interface to then put those ideas into a logical structure, and then could click a button and get the large language model to take that structure, take those ideas and write the first draft of a proposal outline. And that process, like to write a couple of thousand words, might have taken a decent writer half a day to do. Now you could do that first draft in a couple of minutes using our software. And so then it was thinking about how all along the way could you then, so that would be the first thing you do. And then you go, well, we need some case studies. Well, how do you find case studies and insert case studies? How do you put in statistics? And that took us then to a whole lot of things around retrieval augmented generation and linguistic engineering and what's now being called context engineering and a whole host of other things.
I've got recent, very, very painful experience of form filling for government tenders. It seems to me that the ideation piece relies on, at least in our manual process, a lot of ingestion of the context of what the F are they writing about. Some of it's nice and it goes into a spreadsheet, but other times it's like, what do they what does the English mean and what is it they're looking for? So presumably before the ideation, you guys were already sucking in a lot of and ingesting a lot of context.
Yeah, absolutely. So really starting to understand that whole workflow. And the start of proposal workflow is kind of pre-opportunity when you're shaping the invitation to tender that's about to come out. You're talking to the officials to try and make sure that what they put out is something that you can respond to and is something which is sensible, right through then to taking the documentation, reading the documentation, finding out what needs to be answered, taking everything from a minister's speech to a PowerPoint presentation that was given at the kickoff event to all of these pieces of information that have got nuggets that you need to either must include or should include if you want to score a winning score. I mean, this thing about proposals, and particularly public sector proposals, but also business to business, private sector, it's scored evidenced prose. They literally tell you how they're going to score it. You just need to make sure that you're scoring it, according to what they want to see. And that again, there's both explicit scoring criteria, but also implicit scoring criteria that you get. So, a customer using our software for a very big contract, and they particularly focused on laser weaponry over other sorts of weaponry because they knew that one of the admirals who was going to be marking it was particularly into his laser weaponry, right? That's kind of an implicit
You would have thought little things like that would be more human than AI, but I guess things have moved on quite a lot.
Yeah, well, again, I'm going to come back to, but it's about helping, the AI doesn't know that, a human knows that, but the human can tell the AI, and the AI can then use that as context.
So it strikes us that you've really stolen the march and created a very particular category using AI. I mean, it's clearly defined. I mean, how big is the total addressable market for responding to requests to tender?
The great thing about the public sector market is it's quite well understood because modern democracies have to be transparent. So they actually publish, how much money they're spending and who they're spending it with. So if you add up everything that the US government spends with external suppliers and everything the UK government spends with external suppliers and everything the European Union spends with external suppliers, if you add all of that up globally, that comes to about $5 trillion. $5 trillion.
Which is a nice number in anybody's language.
Exactly.
And then your portion of that is the bidding cost portion.
Well, if you said what's the bidding cost, and we estimate about 10% of that would be spent on bidding. So you've got a $500 billion global market, and if you can make that 50% more efficient, that's $250 billion then you can spend. So it's so look, the total addressable market is probably a little less than that, but it gives you some sense of the scale of how much money is spent actually on the cost of competition.
In all of the companies that are using your technology, and listeners, this is not about amazing applications of AI at some point in the future. This is AI actually being used right now to do some of the most basic tasks that have to be done in large business and large government. What is it that actually happens within the companies that you sell when they start using their technology? Is it just they're reaping a great advantage in efficiency? They're doing things much, much more quickly with less people? Or are they going, we can apply for a lot more contracts now? What's actually the balance, or is there one?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. It sort of depends for different customers. So some customers, maybe they've got a small proposal team, 5 or 6 writers, and they would love to, maybe they're putting in 150 proposals a year and they'd love to put in 300. They simply don't have the capacity. So taking our software on allows them to, put in twice as many proposals, win twice as much work, grow twice as fast. And so that's a clear use case. Other, like with very large businesses, often they're already going for all of the business that they can go for. And that will be, a typical proposal process might take them 9 months to a year to go through. And how they're generally doing that is they're spending 6-7 months getting to a first draft, and then they're spending the last couple of weeks refining it. And actually, as we know in all professional writing and most writing, it's the redrafting that is the important bit. All first drafts are rubbish. Right? It's the second draft, third draft. So what they're doing is just moving everything to the left using our software. So instead of spending like 6 months getting to a first draft, they're spending 6 days getting to a first draft. And then what they're doing is then using that additional time that they've got to iterate, to get better, to really understand the customer better. And so what they're seeing is their win rates increase. We actually got So there was a study done by MH&A Consulting of businesses who use our software versus businesses who don't use our software. And they found that on average, and they compared the revenue growth between 23 and 24 for businesses using our software or not. And businesses using our software grew 60% their revenue more than businesses not using our software. So we've just got really, really good external evidence points now as to the value of using AutogenAI. So, of course, it's a time saving, but mostly what businesses have done with that time saving is use it to grow faster rather than use it to cost cut.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your strategy in getting to those businesses? And we're a European-based podcast, and we like talking to European companies, and we like to understand how companies that are founded in Europe become very successful around the world. And can you talk about your strategy in expanding the business and serving companies that are outside of just the UK?
Do you know, it's another wonderful thing about the market that we're in. If you do business with the US government, it has to be transparent. It's a big democracy. So the US government publishes a list of everybody it spends money with. The UK government publishes a list of everybody it spends money with. The European Union publishes a list of everybody it spends money with. So we actually have the best data in the world about that. We just go, right, who does the UK government has 40 strategic suppliers. They're all people they do more than £100 million worth of business with a year. All of those 40 strategic suppliers should be our customers. Indeed, 3/4 of them now are our customers. So you've got this incredibly good data set about the people who are competing for government contracts. In Australia, the data's even better. They don't just publish who won the contract, they publish who lost the contract. So that's a fantastic source of being able to go to anyone who's lost a contract and said, you should have been using our software.
So that doesn't get away from the problem that you're a small supplier and some of these guys are very, very big. So I don't know if that's where you're going, Jonathan, but how does one start to break into those big ass contracts?
It's your classic, account-based marketing, right? So while other people are going to AI conferences, I hate AI conferences. AI conferences are full of my competitors. I go to things like Construction Week in Milton Keynes, where there were a whole load of very, very boring, kind of big construction companies who compete for a lot of work, both in the private sector and the public sector. So it's going where our customers hang out. We're members of lobbying groups in London, in Westminster, in Washington, because that's where those big businesses do. That's where they do business with government. So we talk at events, we attend those events, we publish a lot of kind of thought leadership in this space about how to win contracts, and so that's really and then it is it's like I mentioned how long it takes to sell to the public sector. Selling to big businesses, these are 9-month to 12-month sales cycles for big enterprise businesses. So you've got to get in at multiple levels. You want to be talking to a lot of different people. Typically, we'll be talking to actually proposal writers as well as proposal directors, as well as corporate development directors, as long as finance directors, CTOs, CIOs, chief executives. All of those people who are in different levels of the organisation are responsible for that organisation's growth. So who have a stake in buying our software so you can grow fast.
And that's certainly a lesson for anybody listening to this who's in the relatively early stages of building their first firm, is that just because you've got something absolutely brilliant, which has amazing advantages, it saves loads of people loads of money, don't think you're going to have a very, very complex procurement process to actually get to people who have the money and do want to buy it and have a reason to buy it, and all those classic things that you have to have in a sales cycle.
100%. Do you know, I talk to a lot of, I invest in a lot of startup businesses, and I talk to a lot of founders. And one thing I say to every founder, because founders all we like building beautiful things, right? We like building brilliant products. And what I say to pretty much everyone on this is, look, a 9 out of 10 sales team with a 3 out of 10 product always beats a 3 out of 10 sales team with a 9 out of 10 product, always.
Great marketing always beats great technology.
Yeah, so you want to, now look, I'm not interested in selling rubbish. Life's too short, right? So we have a 9.5 out of 10 product and a 9.5 out of 10 sales team, but you need both. You have to invest in both.
So talking about such things, where do you see AutogenAI evolving over the next 3 to 5 years, both in terms of its technology and the types of problem that you will be tackling?
Yeah, so look, in the same way that nobody writes a financial model in the corporate world without using Excel, no one will write competitive prose without using AutogenAI. So it'll just be, and already people are using this as a verb. And we had
nice.
one woman was talking to us about how, because government does this all the time, right? And big business, that a proposal had dropped on the Friday and it needed to be in on the Monday. And, she was supposed to be, going out with her husband and, kind of like, doing nice things over the weekend. And she said, look, usually I'd have spent all weekend doing it. I've managed to get it completely finished on the Friday because I AutogenAI'd the shit out of it. Kind of. That's what we like to do. So in terms of the product advancing, it's really would be the everything proposal engine. So everything from finding opportunities to down selecting those opportunities to then coming up with that first draft to then incrementally improving that first draft to then sending it out for review to getting those reviews back to using AI to action those reviewed comments to second pass reviews to submission to then implementation plans to learning from where you've won, learning from where you've lost. Really everything sitting in our engine from flash to bang of that written proposal cycle. And, we're already kind of like a considerable way there, but we're always thinking in that process, how do we concertina it? How do we make it more efficient? Where's the right place to keep a human? Where's the right place to use AI? Where's the right place to use other technologies? Because just because you've got a hammer, not everything's a nail. Large language models are remarkable, but we don't have to use large language models for everything. What we're trying to do is help people get to winning proposals faster, more efficiently, more effectively.
Do I detect from that there's a bit of post-proposal as well? Like where you may take this, like, okay, so I've won it. How do I live up to the criteria that I've won it with in my submission?
Exactly, that's a key thing people are already using our software for. So how do I take this now into an implementation plan? How do I take out all the key commercials that we identified? How do we take out, what are our deliverables that we promised? All of those things that you can now just, pull out in seconds using our software. So exactly. So how do you go from the finding of the opportunity to the winning of the opportunity to the implementing the opportunity? And of course, then, how do you win it on the rebid in 5 years' time?
Great. It sounds like you're already on the road to becoming the generic, and we can all auto-gen AI the hell out of every proposal we do in the future.
Are you still developing separate marketing plans for each of your different channels to market? Can you really sanction messages reaching the same customers from unconnected targets? Listen, it's now the AI age. Things need to change. Positive is a different sort of AI-powered agency. From our very beginning, we've integrated marketing communications from PR to events, social to paid ads. Working smarter means working integrated. Let us show you what a truly joined-up strategy could do for your tech business. Contact Positive today with an email to hello@positivemarketing.com. You've got to learn to earn.
So, Sean Williams, the first question we wanted to ask you, what are some of the most unexpected lessons you've learned since launching and scaling AutogenAI? And have they been different from your previous journey of founding, scaling and exiting Corndel?
Yeah, I think, one of the big lessons at AutogenAI is just how dynamic you need to be because of how fast we're growing, but of course, because of how fast artificial intelligence is moving. So I talk a lot about when you're exponentially growing as we are, whatever you did 3 months ago is now half as good as it needs to be. So, your systems and processes which were built for $1 million company don't work when you're a $4 million company, don't work when you're a $10 million company, don't work when you're a $20 million company. So really the speed of adaptation, the as soon as you've identified a problem and solved it, the solution you've come up with probably isn't going to work in 6 months' time. So that, I think that pace of change, that dynamism, that understanding that these are complex, iterative systems. I think I did have that to an extent at Corndel, but the Education Skills Funding Agency don't move as fast as AI does. Yeah.
So you do, one of the things you have to commit to as a founder and leader is constant and rapid relearning, knowing that change is going to keep getting faster inexorably. And if you don't understand that, you're pretty soon going to fall off the entrepreneurial horse.
100%. I think there's a thing as humans in general that we're always, once I've finished this, or once I've done this, or once I've solved this problem, then all the problems will be solved, everything will be done, and I'll be happy. Right? I think that's part of the human condition. And of course, the secret is to enjoy the journey. It's never going to be like that. As soon as you solve one problem, another 10 will have appeared somewhere else, and you need to go and solve those. And so you have to take that on board. You have to enjoy it. You have to embrace the chaos. I think there's a certain sort of individual that survives and thrives in very, very fast scaling businesses. If you come in and say, "Where's the rule book?" If you come in and say, "Have we got a process for this?" You're probably in the wrong place. I say to everyone who works for us, the great thing about being here is you're a big cog in a small machine. What you do matters. In a big corporate, what you do doesn't matter.
That must limit who you can recruit, though, right?
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, and that is part of what we look for in recruitment, is people who are going to enjoy that, people who are going to find that thrilling and exhilarating, not dangerous and unsettling.
I believe the phrase in recruitment circles would be self-starters comfortable with ambiguity. This is probably what you need.
Many, many moons ago, I remember putting a job description together. We were actually employing employment advisors for one of those projects I was bidding 20 years ago. And my boss, as part of the job description, said, "We promise to challenge you. We promise to take you out of your comfort zone." And we got a letter from the PCS union saying, as far as we're concerned, challenging people and taking them out of their comfort zone means exposing them to unacceptable levels of workplace stress.
In that reality, has your leadership style evolved as the companies have grown and the world has changed? We all know in tech, change happens every day. But are there some themes that have happened in your leadership style as you've moved through?
Yeah, I think again, I mentioned how change is happening. So when you're growing so fast, you need to, the organisation needs to change, the systems, the processes need to change, and I think that's doubly true of what it takes to be. There's a very different style of leadership when you've got 6 people sat in a room all around the same table, to when there's 160 people across 3 continents, and then when there's 10,000 of us in a couple of years' time. Those are different leadership skills. They're different qualities. So yeah, kind of at the start, it's incredibly hands-on. And to an extent, I still like to, partly because it's also what I enjoy. I like rolling up my sleeves and solving real problems. But as you get bigger, you're doing less of the doing. You're doing a lot more through others. And so it becomes a lot more about, getting the right people around you, making sure that the systems and incentives are right, making sure that they're happy, making sure that, you've got the right, everyone's moving in the same direction, all of the usual then people politics-y type stuff that happens as you get bigger, that you're trying to minimize that, or at least use it as productively as you can. So I think those start to be the leadership skills that have really come to the fore.
The things that you talk about in a later stage company really amount to ultimately creating a strong company culture. But you do have your work cut out when you're doing that. You're expanding fast per se, but you're expanding in different geographies with different cultures, and you're working at the cutting edge of AI. You're in the unknown on multiple fronts. How do you deal with that as a leader?
Yeah, look, I think it's one of the paradoxes I talk about. It's the paradox is most of what's said about culture is utterly bollocks. But culture is like the most important. It is the most important thing, right? Kind of both of those things can be true. So again, I used to talk about in my previous business, Corndel, when we talked about our values. We talked about values in AutogenAI. The first value of Enron was integrity, which they had in massive letters up on their corporate office before committing the biggest corporate fraud in Western capitalism. So there's a difference between some nonsense you can put up on a wall and what you actually do, right, and the behaviours you exhibit. So we came up with a set of values at Autogen AI, and then we went out to the whole business and we sat down and said, look, what's important to us? And then we synthesized those up into a set of 7 core principles. I won't go through all of them now, but some of the ones I particularly like, ask forgiveness, not permission, turn it up to 11, kind of, those are, sort of the things that customers is our first one. So, again, I'm not suggesting that maybe any of these are particularly unique or groundbreaking, but I think they reflect our language and they reflect the way we do business and the things we really obsess about.
So you're giving us the impression that you walk the talk, and that is really, really important. So I mean, how do you walk the talk? If you've got 7 principles by which the business is managed, how do you exemplify those?
Yeah, so one is what you reward, right? So we have our quarterly awards where people can nominate their colleagues, and people get awarded in one of the categories of our principles, and so we really recognise those. One of my favourite things is the annual awards, where as I say, we talk about break the rules, right? Kind of like when it's the right thing to do. So we have an award for the person who's broken the most rules.
Wow.
Kind of, and that scares the finance team a little bit, but kind of,
and the HR team,
and the HR team.
By the way, on that basis, you'll be getting Paul and my CVs pretty quickly.
Yeah. So what do you reward, and and that's more difficult, right? Kind of to do some of those sorts of things. But what do you reward, and then what do you not accept? So kind of where we've got people who are not able to work within our principles, then we're going to part ways very quickly. So what do you reward? What do you say is unacceptable? What do you not tolerate? What do you tolerate? What don't you tolerate? How do you communicate? Kind of what things do you talk about? So we've got 4 pillars at AutogenAI. So build, sell, delight, and demonstrate value. So we're always asking ourselves, build the best proposal software in the world. Sell, there's no point having the best proposal software in the world unless you're getting it out to people. Delight users. I want to have users who adore using our software, who, when they're Auto-Gen-AIing the shit out of stuff, are like doing it with a smile on their face because it's such a beautiful experience using our product. And then demonstrate value, like make sure that the companies who are ultimately buying our software know they are growing faster because they're using our software, and they can see that and they can measure it. So everything we do, and I always say to strategies about what you don't do and all of those kind of cliches, but every single question in AutogenAI, everything we do, we always ask, how is this contributing to build, sell, delight, or demonstrate value? Because if it isn't, then we're not doing it because we don't have time to do it. We've already got 10,000 things on. We haven't got time to do stuff which doesn't directly contribute to those 4 objectives.
Yeah, and that delight piece is interesting because you must have had a notion when you looked at forms, which you were, immodestly world-class at, and the magic of AI. You must have thought, shit, if I can bring these 2 things together, it might create delight in the people who have to fill out the forms.
100%. And, it's anyone who's ever done, right, a kind of medium complexity procurement, or even a fairly simple box ticking, right, knows just what a pain in the arse it is, right? So, we've never had to explain the kind of problem to anybody, right?
But the delight bit, right?
We've not had to, this is your pain point. Like everyone gets the pain point.
Yeah, good. Love it.
You know what? This really grinds my gears.
Next, I would actually like to go on to the section in this show we call Grinds My Gears. For those people who don't understand that analogy, it's about something which particularly annoys you. So we were going to ask Sean, what's annoying him in the current tech, business, government environment. And we were thinking about it. And of course, doing our research as we should. And we found that the little piece written by Sean recently, and it was just very, very interesting. I'm going to read it because I want Sean to explain it, because It's very, very interesting. So you said in financial markets, in technology, and in life more broadly, false certainty can often lead to bigger problems than lack of knowledge. This concept is encapsulated in the phrase, often misattributed to Mark Twain, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so."
That false certainty, that I kind of hate stupidity. I hate kind of, or at least what I perceive to be stupidity. I hate following the crowd. So I think when I hate kind of people who are just saying stuff and they've given no thought to whether that might be true or not. So an example of this would be like artificial general intelligence. Like, we are nowhere close to artificial general intelligence. It is just an absolute fantasy. And so I try to give people the benefit of the doubt on where this fantasy's come from. And a lot of it is around performance on benchmark tests. So, you come up with some maths tests and some verbal reasoning tests and some logical reasoning tests, and you go, oh, look, computers are now better than most humans on those. And they keep getting better and better. Therefore, computers are more intelligent than humans. But that's just a reductio ad absurdum on the notion that those benchmark tests are any sort of proxy for human intelligence. And again, either artificial, well, why do a lot of very smart people think AGI is just around the corner? And I say, well, just take a step back and do some basic, if you've got a humanities education, do a bit of basic, what we would call, history. Why is this person telling me this? So I always think it's quite funny. Oh, yeah. Nvidia's chief executive says that demand for chips is going to go up and up and up and up. He knows what he's talking about. Doesn't he sell chips? It's a mystery to me why he might be saying that, right? Given he's the biggest chip manufacturer in the world. Right? So if you're building large language models like OpenAI or Meta or DeepSeek or anyone, if you're building large language models and it turns out that those large language models are all asymptoting in terms of their capabilities and it's becoming completely commoditized, and you've spent billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars building something which now everyone's going to have, and you're going to have to sell at like cents because you're in a commoditized race to the bottom on price, you're going to need to tell a good story about AGI or something, because you need to keep the money flowing, because you're trying desperately to find something which is going to differentiate you going forward, which, by the way, is probably a move into product, which you see them all right now kind of all now doing. So I guess for me it was and then there's a real credulity sometimes, like when I'm talking to kind of potential, investors and stuff around this, and they a lot of them really do drink the Kool-Aid, and that grinds my gears. Like, just think critically. Like if someone's telling you something, think about, why are they telling me this? Is it true? Could it be wrong? Just trying to, like some people always just want to see the surface and the shiny thing. I like engineers. I like people who go, how does that work? What is it actually doing? They don't just want to believe the hype and the magic. Oh, cryptocurrency, we're going to abolish fiat currency. Everything's now going to be done on the blockchain. No, it isn't. Right, just think about how money actually works throughout the course of human history.
From a category perspective, is there anything else that really grinds your gears?
Yeah, I think we're also seeing, because this is such a fast-moving space, often we've come up with an idea, we're talking about something, and then everyone ignores it, and everyone thinks, oh, that's not a real thing. And then 18 months later, someone more famous than us in the AI community comes up with it, and everyone's like, that's brilliant, what a great idea. Like, hang on, we've been saying that for 18 months. So came out with a tweet. Someone had said we shouldn't be talking about prompt engineering anymore. We should be talking about context engineering. And he said, context engineering, it's actually about the how you build the variable that you're going to put into a large language model. And we've been saying this for 18 months. We were actually calling it linguistic engineering. Fairly obviously, in any kind of regression model, the most important thing in determining the dependent variable is the independent variable, right? What you put in is the most important thing in terms of what you get out. And so, people have been talking about fine tuning, and people have been talking about different models and which was the most powerful. And we were always saying, look, that stuff's all important, But what's most important is the linguistic engineering. How are you putting together the variable that you're putting in? What does that look like? And, we were talking about things like linguistic ingredients, how you retrieve those linguistic ingredients, how you mix them together. And now that's been called context engineering, and it's just slightly frustrating. But look, at the end of the day, I would say ideas are cheap. It's always about execution. But if we have the ideas very early on, it means we've got 18 months longer of execution to get it right.
So we did warn in the introduction that our guest today, Sean Williams, is a bit of a Renaissance man. And he's done quite a lot with his life so far. We couldn't help noticing that you established the Guitar Club, founded with a thoroughly agreeable mantra that we believe that great guitars shouldn't be put up on walls or stuck away in vaults. They should be played by people that love them. Can you talk us through this part of your life and perhaps loves? And do you have a favourite guitar or guitars?
So Guitar Club was a great idea. Guitar Club's a really good lesson in business. Everyone I told the idea to thought it was a great idea. So, sharing economy, but for kind of vintage guitars. Everyone I spoke to said, that's a brilliant idea, you should do it. And I did, and it was a terrible business. But so it's, again, there's a difference between people telling you something's a good idea and actually then buying it as a service. So I think my wife thinks it was just an excuse for me to go out and buy a load of guitars, which, I just think was...
and I think that was probably, if you were honest, that was the strategy you were pursuing, right?
If I'm really honest, there's probably a level of truth to that. So, and it was one of those. Actually, I think the other thing is don't start a business with a fallback option, because if you do, so I always knew that guitars were a very good investment class, right? And the guitars themselves would appreciate in value. So it wasn't a business where it was always going to be a good bet. So I loved the journey. I met some fantastic people when I was kind of putting the collections together, some fascinating kind of characters with some wonderful kind of life stories. So my favorite guitar is probably my 1968 Les Paul, which is it just sounds, it's that sound of rock. And my biggest regret would probably be not buying a 1959 Les Paul.
Thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about category design, head to becategorical.com. If you need help designing and dominating your category, then get in touch. Contact details are in the show notes.